Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today we're joined by Jen and Mark from Bancor. Discover how they're revolutionizing DeFi and tackling issues like sandwich attacks and slippage. Hear firsthand about the future of decentralized exchanges. And always remember, nothing stated is financial advice. Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today we have two major contributors at Bancor. We have Jen and Mark. Jen, we'll start with you. Could you give us a brief introduction into how you made your way to Web3 and what was your come to crypto moment?
Yeah, I actually wasn't involved in technology or anything of the sort. I think my coming to crypto moment was when I really started to research what the technology was. Somebody had mentioned Bitcoin. I had no idea what it was. The idea of blockchain technology, smart contracts, what it actually enables people to do and achieve was really what got me into it and got me diving deep into DeFi specifically.
Absolutely, Mark.
Yeah, so I was an organic synthetic chemist during leading up to the pandemic, and I had a huge amount of work that was blacked out because I wasn't allowed to go to work at the time. I was working for the CSIRO in Australia. And the city I was living in, which was Melbourne, went into sort of 24 months of contiguous lockdown, which was hugely problematic for my research career. And in the time that I had on my hands while being forced to stay at home, I was trying to think of ways to be useful. And I joined a couple of different DAOs, first as just a volunteer, doing some analysis, some algorithm development and that kind of thing. And then when I sort of threatened to go back to work because things were sort of relaxing, the Bancor Foundation reached out with an offer for full-time employment, first as a researcher. Shortly after that, I was the head of research and the product architect, and now the leader of the project.
Absolutely. And because we touched on Bancor, let's talk a little bit about what's the mission and the overall project, just like a quick explanation if people aren't familiar.
Sure. Yeah. So the mission statement hasn't really changed since 2017. So Bancor's original purpose was to bring the exchange primitive to a blockchain in sort of a more profound way than its predecessor had, which was Ether Delta. I'm not sure if you were around cryptocurrency in that time, but Ether Delta was really the first true decentralized exchange. And it had an order book-like structure. Its implementation was really good for the time, but people were still settling into the idea that there is a specific design constraint on like what a blockchain can realistically support. And because of the way that Ether Delta was run and operated, it also was in clashing sort of existing regulatory. The regulatory landscape at the time. And so the idea with Bancor was to bring about something new, something that is truly decentralized and permissionless. And so this was the invention of the AMM. We had an ICO back in 2017, and this was used to construct the Swiss Foundation where we're still headquartered. It can only spend money on the development of blockchain technology that furthers the sort of the decentralized exchange technology base. So yeah, it's pure DeFi for right to its core.
Absolutely. And Jen, I want you to discuss, because if people are new to the crypto ecosystem, they've got their Coinbase account, maybe they even have a MetaMask. And let's talk a little bit, because you guys are experts on like what at its core is an AMM. Can we walk through maybe some of the features of it? Like there's like liquidity pools, there's swapping tokens. Let's talk a little bit about that. And Jen, I'll start with you.
Beginner definition of it is it's a platform for trading tokens. Right. I mean, at its simplest definition, this is really what it is. It's you can buy and sell your tokens. It obviously becomes much more complicated, and there are those nuances that really aren't spoken about too much or made the information made readily available to new users. But at its core, an AMM is an automated market maker. You can trade your tokens and make exchanges.
Absolutely. Mark, if you want to supplement any of that.
Yeah, sure. So the AMM like design principle is how can you recreate a marketplace on a blockchain without recourse to the sorts of like memory requirements that are used to operate something like Binance or Coinbase. And this is where Ether Delta was going to struggle eventually because maintaining that amount of data on chain is just prohibitive. And so the what the AMM is is the answer to how to make something that creates a like an order
Liquid
depth,
market.
um, a liquid market that allows tokens to be exchanged backwards and forwards, um, in much the same way that it would had it been a very healthy order book on any centralized platform. And the way that it does this is with some very clever calculus to essentially abstract away what the order book looks like at various stages, and then say, well, here's a function that approximates exactly that behavior. And so this means that, for example, as you're trading with it, the token that you're buying appreciates in price slowly, or its price quotes move up as you're buying it. And similarly, if you're selling a token into an AMM, its price quotes or its bidding prices will depreciate. And so it's meant to sort of create that kind of response from the market, where if demand for something is going up, then its price quotes will go up. And if something is oversupplied or if there's too much selling pressure, then the bidding prices will come down. And to sort of encapsulate that with a very simple formula was the research goal of the original of Bancor B1, and this is what has led to what was called once the Bancor formula, and has spun out a large number of sort of progenitor protocols, things like Uniswap, like Balancer, like PancakeSwap, and so on. These are all basically using the same principle. But on top of that, it's not enough just to have something that looks and responds like an order book. You also need a clever account keeping mechanism to keep track of, who is owed what when they remove liquidity from the system. And this is where the smart token invention is so important. And this is, it was first called the smart token, and then it was called relay tokens for a little while. And then after DeFi summer, everyone came to know it as the pool token. And I think everyone kind of understands what a pool token is these days. It's the pro rata share component of the smart contract that dictates how much liquidity is owed to you should you choose to withdraw right now. So yeah, the AMM invention back in 2017 was all of those things. How do you create something that looks and feels like an order book without it being a true order book? And how do you keep track of who is owed what?
Absolutely. And now that we've gone into kind of the technical depths of Bancor, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges you all faced while building your project. I'm sure there's marketing, fundraising, all kinds of issues. Now, I know Jen is an expert in marketing. Would you talk a little bit about like how you get the message out about Bancor and kind of attract more users to it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, like Mark and I discuss this all the time, like the difficulties in marketing, right? I think that Bancor has taken more of an educational approach, as well as, like your typical sort of marketing, right? It's podcasts, it's getting on and discussing the product and talking. A lot of it for, Bancor, for me personally, has always been really engaging with users and potential users, showing them what the product is, getting on calls with them, showing them what it is, understanding their questions, and really understanding where there might be any sort of misunderstandings or where I can be a little bit clearer in my messaging. I think in terms of difficulties or challenges, since DeFi really became a thing and as new users start, or I shouldn't say start, but really continue to enter the space, there are certain terms, certain things that have kind of taken on their own definition, right? And a lot of marketing from what we have seen, and I say we, Mark and I, because like I said, this has been a big thing for us, is how projects present themselves or certain things. You know, there are risks to using an AMM. There are risks to doing certain things. And a lot of the marketing tends to just forget that, right? And so we will speak to the product. I will, you know, speak to the product, but also make sure that the users are aware of what they're actually doing, right? Like the sort of unknowns. We've been very outspoken about, you know, Bancor's newest product is called Carbon DeFi, right? It's immune to sandwich attacks, and there's zero slippage for makers. These are two topics that we've spoken about, that we really market and try to educate users on, and what these actually are. I think this is sort of an obstacle, is, you know, to make effective marketing out of this sort of education, or even a re-education, depending on where the market, you know, where the industry really stands in terms of, you know, these words and these things that are being thrown about so loosely.
Absolutely. And real quick, just in case anyone's unfamiliar, let's get a quick definition on sandwich attack, because some people might be feeling hungry right now, but it has a much bigger meaning than that.
Mark, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, a sandwich attack is a very specific kind of exploit that is opened by the way that an AMM behaves. And so the easiest way to understand this is that, just as I was saying in the beginning of this podcast, when someone is buying tokens off of the bonding curve, that means those tokens get more expensive. And so you might look at the bonding curve and say, yeah, I like that price. I'm happy to execute a trade at that price. And then after you sign that transaction, that goes into the mempool where everyone can see the trade that you're trying to perform. And that trade may or may not have a minimum return attached to it. Let's just go with the easy case to describe, where there is no minimum return, just a trade amount that you're trying to execute. For example, buy 1 ETH or sell, you know, 1 ETH or whatever it happens to be. Someone can see that transaction, and as they're, you know, what used to be when they're mining the block, but now is the jobs of searchers and validators and block builders. But when they see that transaction, they can look at it and say, well, I can actually force you to pay more than you were expecting to by putting a trade in the same direction as you before your transaction occurs. So my trade happens first, which means I'm buying the same token that you were trying to buy. And now your trade is going to execute at a slightly worse price, sometimes a dramatically worse price.
I was going to say, sometimes not so slightly.
Sometimes not so slightly. And then as soon as your transaction is done, I'm going to back run the whole thing, right? Because now the order book is positioned in such a way that the bidding prices are higher. So all of the tokens that I bought ahead of your trade, I can just sell back and collect the higher bidding prices on the way down. And this means that there's an effective theft, right? I do consider it theft. Sandwich attacks are malicious. Front running by itself isn't necessarily malicious, but sandwich attacks are always malicious. And it's a way of basically baiting someone with a price that they were happy to pay, and then as their transaction is executed, giving them a completely different price. That's effectively what a sandwich attack is and does.
And profiting significantly at times from that.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference.
And let's talk a little bit about this, because some people might come from the traditional finance space and they're like, okay, this sounds kind of like high frequency trading. Is it such that they're just, because they can see the mempool, they're now just paying more gas to essentially front run that transaction? Or is there something, is it purely a speed of connection thing?
Well, it depends. So yeah, in general, whoever is building the block wants to be bribed, you know, to accept the transaction order the way that you have asked for it. Right? And this is the job of the searchers. And yeah, you will have to pay a higher gas price for it. But this wasn't always true. And even today, it might not always be true. Because if you are the person who is making the decision about how the block is built, you might be your own searcher, right? And so eventually it comes down to whose responsibility is it to decide which order the transactions occur in. And if you are in a position of power, that you are just determining that order yourself, then you can process your own transactions as a part of the block building process. In general, that's not how it occurs. Generally, the block builders are busy with other things, and it's the job of others to propose how the block should be built, and then tip the block builder a certain amount in order to accept the proposal. And this means that effectively, if there's a sandwich attack that's worth, let's say, $100, $99 of that value is going to go to the block builder, because it's a race to the bottom. Eventually, everyone is tipping, an amount high enough that they're certain that their proposal is going to be accepted, but also, not so high that they still have a small margin for themselves, but also high enough that they don't think that someone else is going to tip a higher amount and get that transaction instead of them. So yeah, there's actually a very well characterized game theoretic argument for why this has to be the case, and also why the margins for performing these attacks are going to become diminishing over time, and why the block builders essentially get all of that value for themselves, even though they're the ones that aren't actually performing the attack.
Absolutely. So we talked about Carbon DeFi briefly, and we talked about how it kind of resolved some of the existing problems in the DeFi ecosystem. Let's talk a little bit about what are the problems it's resolving, and then kind of how you guys go about evangelizing.
It's funny, if I can just speak on this really quickly. We started with this with, any newcomers come into crypto and they have their Coinbase or, what is an AMM, right? Essentially, we come into this space, and I say we generally, this is what we want to do. We want to buy a token. We want to sell a token, right? We want to buy it low. We want to sell it when the price goes up, and we want to walk away. We want to do it again and again, as many times as we possibly can. With an AMM, you can do this. I was saying you can buy and sell a token, but as we, spoke about, you're not necessarily getting those prices that you are thinking you're getting. The price shown to you is not actually the price that you're receiving, right? Whether you buy or sell. So with Carbon DeFi, users go in, and because it's more of an order book like DEX versus an AMM, users can define and quote the exact prices that they want to buy or sell a token, and that is the exact price that they'll receive. So, the definition of sandwich attack can be complicated, right? But it can really be as simple as there is no back running. You're not being forced to buy or sell a token at a price that you're not happy with, right? And so this is one of those solutions that Carbon DeFi offers, or I should say two, right? Is that there is no risk of the sandwich attack, and the prices that you quote are the exact prices that you'll receive, right? Slippage is another one. We didn't talk about slippage, and we don't necessarily have to. I always just say, if you don't know about it, you don't necessarily need to. If you're making, buying or selling a token on Carbon DeFi, because of the technology that powers it, right? You're not receiving any slippage on Carbon DeFi either. I think those are the main benefits that I can speak to as a liquidity provider, or, as a trader, which is a lot of the user base, but it offers a significantly wider range of benefits as you kind of dig into what Carbon DeFi really is, because it's, as much as I say it's an order book like DEX, it's also serves as a beautiful sort of, I want to say, tool for projects that are looking to effectively bootstrap their liquidity, or as a piece of infrastructure for existing projects or new projects to really build out their feature set as well. So the more you kind of dig into what it is and the technology that powers it, the more you really start to discover and branch out in its different use cases and benefits.
I was going to say, let's go. I always like to do this exercise. It's something we always used to do at BlackRock. We call it the life of a transaction. So let's take a look at Bancor and Carbon. And I'm a new user. I bought some coins on Coinbase, but now I really want to get into that meme game, and I want to trade some random contracts. So I have to bring my money to MetaMask or whatever my wallet is, and then I sign into Bancor with my wallet. Or do I sign into Carbon with my wallet?
Carbon DeFi. Mm-hmm. You'll sign into that.
And
so
then
you
how does
can
it work
create orders. You create orders. You have your options, right? If you strictly want to sell your token, then you just say, I want to sell this token for this token and I only want to sell it at this price. And that's it. You receive that price, right? Now, you can also, that's just your typical limit order, right? These are native to Carbon DeFi. Then Carbon DeFi offers a range order. So say, you know, for if you're coming from a centralized exchange, for example, you want to start scaling out of a position, right? You can set a range, very simply set a range by saying, I want to start selling at this price and I want to sell up to this price. So you can start essentially taking your profits, right, without missing that sort of top ideal mark. So there's the limit order, there's the range order. Then, it could get a little bit more into specific types, but you know, if you wanted to buy that token back at a lower price, Carbon DeFi also offers what is called recurring orders. And this is where a buy order and a linked order are linked together. A buy order and a sell order are linked together. So you can say, I want to sell at this price and I want to rebuy it if it happens to, you know, go back down here. But I will say, because you brought up the meme thing, a lot of users come in, and I think it's kind of typical of our industry, right? We are so accustomed to trading against ETH or against Rep Bitcoin or against our favorite stable. Something with Carbon DeFi, and we won't get into, you know, necessarily the why, but because of the way that it was designed, because of how it was created and what it consists of, you can take any two standard ERC20 tokens, memes included, right? And you can pair them against any other standard ERC20. So you don't have to trade meme tokens against meme tokens. We have so many users that are creating trading strategies because of the way that they trade against each other. So this is something that you could explore if you are someone new coming in as well. See kind of where you can really benefit from these trades if you wanted to.
Yeah, just in terms of the life of the transaction. So someone goes to Coinbase, they pick up USDC, USDT, maybe some ETH, maybe some meme coins. I think that when people buy into a meme coin, you know, they always have this internal dialogue of, you know, if this thing goes 10x, that's where I want to sell. You know what I mean? Like, and not just meme coins. You know, I feel like everything in cryptocurrency, people do have this kind of internal price target that, you know, it's like, I can retire at this price, or I can pay off my car at this price, or I can afford my wedding at this price. You know what I mean? And what they tend to do is, I think, a mistake, which is they're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to just sit on this until that price target is reached. And then I'm going to come in and try and like execute a market order at that price. And a lot of people don't realize that, one, like those market orders are more like price suggestions. Like there's really no such thing as a market price. And so if you're waiting for that price to hit, you might be disappointed with the deal that you actually get delivered. And the second thing is that there's an emotional aspect to once you actually reach your price target, suddenly you get more ambitious, right? You're thinking, okay, I hit my 10x target. Well, why not 100x? If I just do this 3 more times, I'll have $1 trillion. You know what I mean? And like, it sounds ridiculous, but I've seen
it's so true.
You know,
I've lived it.
And the guys, you know, yeah, I mean, the point is that there's a lot of discipline to trading well, and one of those disciplines is, you know, if I bought a certain amount, I'm going to exit and maybe get my money back so that I've got like basically a risk-free position after I get to a certain price target. And then after that, I will, you know, write it up and scale out or something. So the life of a transaction with Carbon DeFi is like, okay, once you've bought your thing from Coinbase, it's like, do you want to commit to a trade to get out of that position after it's reached a certain price target? You can do that on Coinbase, right? You can put a single limit order in to sell up at a certain level, and more people should do that. But then you've got this problem of like, what if I don't meet that exact price target, right? What if 10x was just a little bit too ambitious and maybe I should have gone for like 8.5, right? Or 5x. And so what really seasoned traders will do is they won't put in one limit order, they'll put in like a dozen, right? At lots of different price targets on the way up. And so the life of the transaction can be entirely within, you know, Coinbase. But if you come to Carbon and do it, you don't just get to set a dozen limit orders. You can set a quasi-infinite number of limit orders, right? It's enumerated continuously from one price target to the other. And this means that you've got a very strong risk-adjusted position that has a very definitive payoff profile as certain price targets in the market are reached. it's important to realize that Carbon DeFi is like, it's not a, we like to use words like trading bot and things, and there is a trading bot component to this infrastructure built, but it doesn't execute things automatically. Instead, it just offers your price to the market. And so if someone, it's just like eBay, right? eBay isn't a trading bot. eBay just says, if you're trying to sell a Shrek DVD for $5, we will show the market your Shrek DVD. And if someone's happy to pay $5 for it, then that transaction will become executed should they find your order. And so what happens is that if someone buys it from Coinbase and brings it over to Ethereum mainnet, they can just put that token inside the Carbon smart contracts with a price sticker on it, the same way that, distributors will put, their cornflakes on the shelf at Walmart or wherever cornflakes are sold with a certain price on it. Carbon's exactly that. And so it doesn't have the sort of prescriptive pricing formula that an AMM does. It's much more agent-based. It's much more the user decides what the price is going to be. And this is what Chet was referring to earlier in the discussion.
And would you say the target user for Carbon, like the ideal customer profile, would be a more sophisticated trader that's going to be putting in these like different kinds of orders, or you see it's kind of just like across the board?
Yes,
I think it's across the board. Go ahead, Mark. You go ahead first. I'll give you my opinion after. Go ahead.
Across the board is definitely the right answer. So the truth is like sophisticated traders, and we know them, and we speak to them, and especially like professional market makers are finding, Carbon a little bit more intuitive to deal with because it looks and behaves a lot like a traditional order book does. And so they can, hedge positions the way that they want. They can structure the market precisely how they want. Whereas on an AMM, that can be very difficult to do. But like, what's more natural comparing what Carbon does to what an AMM does? If I told you that this meme coin that you bought off of Coinbase, like, what price do you want to sell it for? Or even better, you haven't bought the meme coin yet. What price would you like to buy it for? Like, set your bidding price. Or how about you set up a short straddle, or if you like, a short gamma option, and buy the instrument that's represented by an AMM? Like liquidity provisioning, the typical AMM one, is a financial instrument that really no one understands. I think that the reason it's so popular is because of things like liquidity mining rewards and because of the simplicity of the user experience, right? Click this button and your tokens go somewhere. But the actual like act, the thing that no one's internalizing, like I said, the financial instrument that you are purchasing, is really complicated and not well understood. And so I think for the people that don't understand, what their liquidity provisioning, financial position actually is, or what it represents with respect to their market outlook, just setting orders, right? And, whether that be bids or asks on something like Carbon is much, much more intuitive. So it does, like, it services the entire bell curve. But there's still this very deeply entrenched sort of cultural, predisposition to AMMs because of, it's kind of where DeFi was born. And I think that that's okay. But for people that are showing up for the first time who are actually trying to understand what AMMs are and what they do, I think something like Carbon is going to be a lot more intuitive for them, and it's actually going to give them the ability to achieve what it is that they want to achieve.
Absolutely, Jen. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but if not, let's go a bit into, because we've talked about user education and how like this DeFi space is quite complicated for newcomers and even people that are quite educated. Like most people probably wouldn't be able to sit here and talk about like a sandwich attack or MEV or any kind of things that they end up dealing with. So let's talk a little bit about like, we'll call it Web3 content creation and marketing. So Jen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, the content creation, I think it comes on all different levels, right? You have your introduction to what the concept is. You have your deeper dives into what those really are, right? Then you kind of have your explainer videos. You have content coming from all different angles, I think is really what it is. I think the discussion. I was speaking earlier about having those discussions with the community members or, potential community members or developers, leaders of different projects, getting that sort of feedback on the product, I think is it allows for that sort of content creation to kind of naturally take shape, right? What am I missing? Maybe I'm saying this in a way that isn't, it's just not sitting, right? It's not hitting the audience. How else can I word this? I think that really, really engaging with others and getting that feedback is so valuable that it not only helps you create that content, but really shape your product, right? And kind of give it that sort of direction for where it might be headed. I know with Carbon DeFi alone, there are so many different features that are going to be built out. It's a matter of priority, right? Like, what do they really want? What will they really use? And where would they find the most value? I think this is a huge base for the content creation and for the marketing also, that allowing us to understand what it is they want to achieve allows for me to really, a whole lot more easily create that sort of content and that sort of marketing material.
Absolutely. All right. Do you find any particular channels to be quite effective? Do you guys find yourself on like Telegram, Discord, Twitter, of course? Like, where do you guys find the most success?
I would say probably Twitter. I would say Twitter, and I say that there is such a mix of users, right? Like, you have your new users. Recently, Carbon DeFi was deployed. Bancor deployed it on Say V2. Right? It's very much more, NFT focused, and DeFi is really having this big presence there. And so now you're able to build this community and engage with them that are wanting to learn DeFi. What actually is this? What can I achieve with this? Tell me all about your product, your project, while still engaging with those that might have more experience in the industry and might be a little bit more knowledgeable on what some of these terms are, or these abilities are that you're bringing to them. Or that you're looking to resolve, right? Different things that you're looking to resolve with your product. So I think Twitter is definitely one of the, if not the main outlet, especially when looking to really engage and get that sort of feedback.
Absolutely. And you guys have talked about, community feedback. Could you give me an example as to like something you heard from the community and you're like, oh, we need to add like XYZ order, or we need to do this, and like how you guys kind of integrated that into the project?
Yeah. Mark, do you mind? Before Carbon DeFi was even deployed, I was reaching out to Bancor community members. We started kind of putting out what Carbon DeFi really was before it was the UI was available for anybody to see, or there was any sort of a test net, inviting them on to one-on-one calls to walk through the product. Either I would walk them through it or they would walk through it themselves. And I can see where their natural hesitations were, what took a little bit more time to understand. And then from their experience, or from, the walkthrough that I had done with them, like, I know one of them, if you go into Carbon DeFi right now and you go to trade your tokens, it's you choose the token you want to buy or sell, and then what you want to buy or sell with, right? And then it comes up with different templates: limit order, range order, recurring order, concentrated liquidity. This was a direct suggestion from a community member who said this would be so much more intuitive if you just show me these templates, what these actually are. And so we took that, and it has been really helpful for users who just go in and say, oh, okay, this is what I can do, So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that, pops into my head. Mark, I know that you've been doing your own as well with other projects and things, if you want to add something. Oh, the simulator. Simulator's huge. May I add one more?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mark had developed, before Carbon DeFi was, available for anybody, before it was deployed, he had developed a backtesting tool. It uses real historic data. It allows users to go in and at the time we were really just showcasing it. We were using it as an example of, this is something you can achieve with Carbon DeFi. This is how the results would compare to an AMM, things of this sort, right? This was something where users appreciated this to the point where Mark had kind of rewritten this, if you will, to make it UI ready. So now it's found on the UI on desktop. users can go in and they can choose their token pair. A chart will show where you really wouldn't be able to find this chart for exotic trading pairs, for example, elsewhere. You can see what that profile looks like, and you can back test it up to 365 days using real historic data, getting a really in-depth view of what is happening with your trades and your funds. So this is probably the most significant feedback that we had received and change or addition, I should say, to Carbon DeFi.
If I could add to that, and this is a long-term criticism that I've heard from like institutional players when they try to interact with DeFi products, liquidity pools especially, is that it becomes an accounting nightmare when they need to, report, how their funds are being used and, which specific trades were executed and so on. So one of the things that led to is what we call the Explorer and the Historical data, where if you have an order type, it doesn't really matter what it is, on Carbon DeFi, you can download like a CSV of every single, transaction that was ever executed against your liquidity. And so when you need to give this to your accountant, or in some cases, the regulator, right? If you are an institutional player, that to have a perfectly transparent and easily auditable and verifiable record of exactly what happened and when and which addresses were participating is extremely helpful.
Absolutely. So are there any like big milestones or developments like your community can look forward to? Because we talked about some exciting products, and I'm sure everyone's really eager to try it out.
I think the native deployment on Say was a really big milestone. Bancor has been around since 2017, and pretty much with its main presence are, on Ethereum. So being on Say is the first really significant Bancor deployment outside of Ethereum. I think this is a really big milestone. I also want to, back in November, Bancor announced that they would be licensing the technology that powers Carbon DeFi. And we've had licensees since then deploy the contracts on Base, Phantom, and Mantle. And now we have some exciting, upcoming announcements of new licensees and new deployments and different ways that projects are not just, taking the contracts and deploying them themselves and licensing what Carbon DeFi actually is, but integrating it directly into their own products or into their own, I guess products, platforms, if you will. I think this is some, a new exciting use case that's kind of come about with the Say deployment. So I'm looking forward to exploring that further, and I think it would be really nice for like the community to have a little bit of that, because it's not like it's out there at the moment, but these are different ways that it's being explored. The project on Say just announced that they would be bootstrapping their liquidity on Carbon DeFi, and I think that this was also something that was newly discovered that was really exciting, and I want to continue exploring with other projects as well. Mark?
Yeah. So Carbon DeFi is not done. The the original design spec was let's say too broad in scope and too optimistic to do all at once. And often, when you're in design phase, you've got this amazing ability to sort of be as ambitious as you want, with the sort of a childlike abandon for what is actually feasible from an engineering perspective. And so even if you've got and I don't mean necessarily just like a wish list, but actually like properly characterized and and civilized ways to achieve this on a smart contract infrastructure. Even after you've done that, you've got to think about things like user flow and how big the smart contract is, and like there are all of these other engineering constraints that can that eventually sort of water down the final product that you end up with. But this is kind of the minimum viable product approach, and all engineers will understand what I mean by that. So you never go to market with the best version of what you've got, because it will take an infinite amount of time. What you go to market with is the first viable version of it, and understand how the market is going to receive it, who is going to use it, and then get some valuable user feedback, which might change, your original perspective on how some of those other features that you had originally planned might actually, come to fruition. There are other things. Jen has teased in a blog previously that there is something called the automatic auctioneer, and that we've actually developed it and been using it ourselves as a project. But it's not something that's available, on our front end, and so no one else can use it. But there have been projects reaching out saying that they have a specific need for exactly what that thing does. And some of our licensees have a specific need for what that thing does. And some traders have said actually they would be very, very glad to have, that as like an order type, which is helpful because that is exactly what it was supposed to be in the beginning. And so we're kind of coming to the end of an auditing process there where this is going to be a much more significant part of the infrastructure. And then eventually an order type that traders can use where it's a, you can think of it as a, liquidate my position, get me the best possible price the chain can offer, which is very similar to what you might expect an aggregator to be able to achieve. But in this case, it's slightly different because it's using a much broader system of solving architecture via the arbitrage fastlane and other things. So yeah, there are big infrastructure changes ahead, and I'm only referring to the things that we've already spoken about publicly. But in my private GitHub, there are other elements to Carbon that have yet to be realized. But for those who have been through my lecture material on YouTube, will I think be able to sort of read between the lines and understand what I would like to achieve at the fullest realization of what this system can become.
Absolutely. So it seems like there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon. And would you guys like to call out, where they can connect with like Bancor, Carbon, you individually? You talked about a YouTube channel online. I'll put all those links in the description.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I can be reached on Telegram at Jen's Telegram or on Twitter at here2DeFi. Carbon DeFi is Carbon DeFi XYZ, and Telegram carbondefi.xyz. The app, super simple, carbondefi.xyz with the say deployment, say sei.carbondefi.xyz. I think for a general overview of what Bancor is building, because Carbon DeFi is a product of Bancor. Mark had mentioned the ARB Fastlane. This is something we didn't really talk about, but this is an arbitrage framework that is directly integrated into Carbon DeFi. Also as its own standalone product. I would check out Bancor.network to kind of get a general scope of what this is, and for not just liquidity providers and traders like we had mentioned, but for token projects, for any lending, borrowing that are looking for these liquidation mechanisms that are, I like to say a little bit more sophisticated or focused, right? Advanced, if you will. They can see the different use cases on either one of carbondefi.xyz or Bancor.network.
Well, very exciting. Well, I want everyone to go and connect. Well, actually, sorry, Mark, you have a YouTube channel. Please call that out.
No, well, I mean, I record a lot of podcasts, but I also try to do a lot of like educational materials. And so just recently I completed a 5-week lecture series for the Circuit Engineering Academy. And so there's a dedicated playlist to that to anyone who wants to search for it. The lecture series is called Concentrated Liquidity from Scratch. And it goes from basically, first principles through the algebra, calculus, and geometry and trigonometry of concentrated bonding curves, both from their original implementation in 2020 from Bancor V2, 2021, which is Uniswap V3, and then 2022, which is Carbon DeFi, which is a type of concentrated liquidity implementation. But prior to that, I've also done lecture series for like the Bonding Curve Research Group. I've presented at a bunch of different conferences. Most recently, the one at ETH Dubai, which is on YouTube. So like, if you just search for my name and any of these keywords, I'm sure you'll find something on YouTube. I do have my own YouTube channel, but I rarely, I haven't put anything on it in years. So that's not worth talking about.
The YouTube worth looking at. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say Bancor's YouTube, and those links are all on Bancor.network.
Yeah, Bancor has a YouTube channel. All of the links are there. Jen will, I'll let her share the YouTube channel. The best way to reach out to me is probably via Twitter. My handle is capitals MBR, which are my initials, but the R extends into Richardson or lowercase 87.
Perfect. Well, I'll put all those links in the description. I encourage everyone to go out, reach out to our guest members, interact with Bancor, Carbon, all the good stuff there. And to all my builders out there, continue to build on Web3. And thank you all for listening.